Welcome to HR Studio Podcast. Through bi-weekly interviews with HR executives, thought leaders, authors, speakers, and trend spotters from the world of HR and beyond, we invite you to listen, learn, and leverage. Welcome to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. HR Studio Podcast is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates, a trusted human capital consulting partner to emerging, mid-market, and world-class organizations. To learn more, visit us at ajoconnor.com.
Welcome, everyone, to HR Studio Podcast. I'm Denise Yosefat, your host for today's episode. Today's topic is actionable ways to better connect as humans and how this strengthens our work environment. Joining us for this discussion is Dr. Melanie Katzman. Dr. Katzman is founder of Katzman Consulting, and for over 20 years, she has been providing psychological expertise to organizations in transition, recovering from crisis, or seeking to grow impact. Along with her team, she facilitates strategy meetings, consults on corporate culture, and does executive coaching. She has also held many faculty positions in different countries and was a senior fellow at Wharton Business School's Center for Leadership and Change Management. Dr. Katzman also co-created and co-hosted the national radio show Women at Work on SiriusXM and has lectured around the world. Dr. Katzman is also the author of the book Connect First, 52 Simple Ways to Ignite Success, Meaning, and Joy at Work. So it's a pleasure having you here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Denise.
So let's get right in. I know our time is we're going to do this in about 22 minutes today. But you've worked with a lot of corporate senior leaders who are bottom line focused. So how do you get them to respect the soft skills?
It's a great question, Denise. And I think the most important thing is to stay focused on the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. And when we sit down and try to figure out why their best intentions aren't landing properly, why all of the project plans and corporate structures are in place, and yet the outcomes just aren't the way they hope, suddenly there's an interest in decoding the emotional cues. So we become detectives, and we think about it in a very strategic way, always focused on the goals and recognizing that the emotion is really the power and the energy behind the achievement that they desire.
I love that word, detectives. So, how can HR leaders, because our audience is HR leaders, how can they help us become those detectives?
Well, I think HR leaders are in a wonderful position to partner with the businesses that they support in trying to identify where the pain points are and to hold up, if you will, the emotional mirror, to ask the executives that you're working with, how are they responding and reacting to certain situations? Often the first clue as to what's going on is the emotions we hold within ourselves in response to an interaction. So if I'm feeling frustrated, angry, impatient, that may be a good indication that the people around me are feeling that way too. And HR leaders can help give the language to the people that they're supporting to enable them to have the conversations they need to have.
Terrific. And so let's talk about some of that language. I know you talk about 52 simple things. So what are some of those things?
Well, so I think the very basic ones really are just encouraging people to make the connections that we're biologically wired to do. So, for example, the book starts with a smile. Seems pretty basic, but you know what? A lot of people don't smile as beautifully as you are right now in our Zoom meeting, right? But many people don't smile, and it's an automatic ignition key. It gets people to respond whether they want to or not. You can't resist a smile. Smile at me, I smile back. And make eye contact. See the people around you. Who's in the room? Too often, I think we walk into a meeting and we pay attention to the people we think are important or the ones that we know. And so if you look at people and engage with them, then you start to realize that person is actually looking somewhat uncomfortable. They're detached. Why are they detached? Then you can have the conversation. So I encourage people to make space to have conversation. We have so much technology that enables us to be interconnected, but we don't always connect. So I encourage people within the book, and of course your listeners, to sometimes pick up the phone, to make those in-person meetings and make them happen, and turn off your electronics and have the engagement that is only possible when I'm really with you, when I'm really sitting and talking. And then we can go on to some other things as well.
So let's talk about the really sitting with you and listening and talking. You know, there are some generational differences, and you look at the younger people and they're texting a lot. And what do we do about that?
So I think that we need to model the behavior that we hope to have. And it's not just millennials or Gen Zers or Gen Xers. I work with executives who all are so time crunched that they're sitting and they're sneaking a look at their phone, or they have their computers up and active. They have all the pings and dings on. First of all, we all know everyone's important, busy, and receiving incoming messages on every device. Turn off the ringers. You don't need a ringer to tell you that you just got a message. You did. Chances are it's there. It's waiting for you. So I really encourage people to, if you're having an in-person meeting, ask everybody to be there, be present, and assure them that you'll give them back the time to be able to check their devices. So rather than having a 1-hour meeting that's not efficient because everybody is half paying attention, say we're going to have 45-minute meetings and everyone has 15 minutes of device time. But for the time that we're together, let's be focused, efficient, and done. So let's reward the good behavior, model it, and don't say it's a generational difference, because I think we see it across the board now.
Across the board. And so what do you do? You know, we're so used to using our computers to take notes, to, you know, we have them in front of us and people may think we're doing something else. How do you handle that and create?
Actually, you know what? I tell people, bring some paper or have paper and pen. You don't need to probably take as many notes as you think, and probably people aren't taking as many notes as they're pretending to. So if we're having a very efficient meeting, that we're going to start with everybody introducing themselves very quickly. I always believe you have to have voices in the room from the very beginning. If people speak, they become more connected to the proceedings. So make sure everybody has a chance to speak. If you are the leader, in any way possible, connect people to the outcome in a way that they feel important and that they are going to contribute, and have some paper and pencil and say, you know, we're going to have our conversation. At the end, we can summarize what the action steps are, what people are responsible for, and then you can take a short note. But really what we want is the eye contact, the ear contact, the deep listening that is so difficult to achieve these days. We're all time deprived and attention deprived.
Mm-hmm. And so how do we get that kind of behavior ingrained in the culture? People are very wary of programs, very wary of, you know, training that it's forgotten the next day. How do you get that into the culture?
Well, that's part of the reason why I wrote Connect First, is to give people 52 actionable steps. You know, we started with, talking about saying, hello with your eyes and your smile, but also saying please and thank you. But I go on in the book to talk about many different ways about apologizing, about clearing conflict, about inviting other people in. And these are all things that we do as individuals. They're not programs. That we take part in programs, and it's almost as if the event has taken place and now we're done. And the responsibility is on the corporation or on the leader or somebody else to make the changes. So here's the good news and the bad news, Denise. It all comes down to us. We have to make those changes. We have to be the example that we want others to follow. And so it's not a program. It's what you do every day. It's how you show up. It's how you conduct yourself. And that's the real change. And that, I think, is the big message for HR leaders, is you don't run a program. You change yourself and you encourage others to kind of be infected by that good behavior.
And how can we cause that infection even more? I mean, we have, there'll be people who look at these tips and they say, okay, I can do that. I'll do 30 of those 53, right? But I'm not going to do the other 22.
Yeah, but believe me, if people did a few, they would already see the impact. I mean, just start every day by thanking somebody for something that they did well, and you'll see the change. You don't need to do all 52. And dip into the book at any time that you have an issue, and I think that you might find a solution. So I don't think we should be overwhelmed with the number of things that we need to do. But to do anything differently will make a change. First of all, it feels good to stimulate ourselves and to experiment with these different kinds of behaviors. But how many people don't want praise? I mean, I can't imagine the person who doesn't want to be praised. It's rocket fuel, and yet people don't praise often or enough within their organizations. I mean, sounds so simple, but having done countless numbers of 360 reviews, I am continually giving people the feedback that the individuals reporting to them would like to hear that they did a good job. I mean, it seems so basic, but it's so powerful.
Yeah, I heard from one individual, they said, well, if I praise too often, it's not going to be meaningful. And I said, well, yeah, but praise at least some.
Well, exactly. I mean, look, anybody could take it to an extreme, right? I encourage people to take responsibility for things that go wrong, but you don't want to walk around all the time and say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But if you praise people and you tie it to an action, then it's legitimized. Right? If I just say, you're the best, then that will become empty. But I really appreciate what you did because it had this effect on me or on the group or on our outcome. That has, that has bite. That has a meaning.
Right. So let's talk about one of the more difficult concepts, which is conflict management. And what are the behaviors around conflict management that people can adapt?
So one of the things is creating a situation such that the conversation is taking place in the most comfortable way possible. And so, believe it or not, I have a section in the book called Be a Good Host. And I remember my editor, McGraw-Hill, saying, why is that under conflict management? And I said, well, try walking into a meeting and you don't know where to sit, you don't know where to hang your coat, you haven't been shown the bathroom, you don't have a glass of water, you don't know the names of the people in the room. It's already you're going to be anxious before you even start. So one of the things to do is really think about what's the right setting to have the conversation. How can people be made comfortable in that meeting? And how do you start from a place of shared concern? Not in your role, not defined by the position, but why are we here today? And how do you want to feel at the end of this meeting? I think if we connect at the human level first, then we can find more shared outcomes that can be worked on in that conversation. If I show up as the person in this role who has to win over you in your role, then we're destined to have a more difficult time.
So let's talk about the productivity. The productivity related to these behaviors. What are you seeing in as people start to do these behaviors? How does it impact productivity? And because leaders want bottom line results, so that's what they're looking for.
So one of the most important things is always, what is the unique solution? Or what is the alternative solution? Or what is it that we don't know that could possibly trip us up? So too often we operate from a place of fear, and fear causes us to close our minds and our doors, and it's just the opposite of what we need to be doing. So to increase productivity, to have often better decision making, it's important to be more inclusive, and that requires us to think about who else needs to be in this meeting. How do I get an invitation out in a way that it will be accepted? So that sometimes requires a phone call. Sometimes it requires doing a little bit of research to make it a more personal invitation when you send a note. Bringing people in, helping them feel comfortable, and not being afraid to ask questions that you don't have answers to. And I think that's where we see tremendous productivity changes, because we've got now people in the room who have different perspectives, different voices, and we're working together on the unknown in a way that's energizing and exciting. And that leads to not only a more engaged group of people, a more interested and interesting group, but often new solutions that can be very effective.
Right. So what have you found, when with these new solutions that can be very effective? Do you have any examples where, when people have adopted some of these behaviors, not all 52 at once?
Right. Well, so a great example is I was working with an entertainment group where you have the branded content team who is trying to produce materials that on the one hand reflect things that their sponsors care about, and on the other hand are authentic for their audiences. And so you have the content developers, and they are continually at odds with the people who are in ad sales. There are people who are generating business. They say, we're keeping the lights on, and you have the creative team saying we have to be pure. And the two were continually aggravated with each other. So I brought them together, and we took a look as a group at the environment in which we're operating, in which there's this interaction that is happening between entertainment, information, advertising, and said, okay, what's happening in the world? Where does this organization sit? And where do each of you want to be if you were going to be declaring success? So everybody talked about what success meant for them. What were the obstacles? The obstacles were timing, communication. People didn't know who was responsible for what. The timing came in ways that were difficult to respond to. People were able to air their concerns, but were asked to listen before they responded. And as a result of having the right people in the room, slowing things down, not speaking in an accusatory way, and having information that everybody could respond to, we were able to then work through the emotions, which were at the core, you don't respect me, you don't understand. That's often what happens, right? I mean, how many of your listeners end up being called in as HR professionals because someone doesn't feel respected or they don't feel understood, right? So we need to bring the people together, slow it down, allow them to connect around a shared mission or outcome, voice the concerns, and then get down to the specifics.
Yeah, and that's a great
you need to do.
Yeah, that's a great example of getting them to get into problem-solving mode versus accusatory mode.
Right, but you know what? First, a lot of people have to vent. It's like, okay, let's vent. When I do these kinds of programs, I interview people ahead of time. I collect all of the emotion. I distill it into a few key messages that I can then put back into the room and say, let's take a look. This is what I heard about how people feel. We talk about that. The feelings matter, but they're not the end point. And I think that goes back to your original question. Like, how do people come to respect emotions at work? Because they are the beginning. They're not the end, right? They allow us to have the conversations that get us to the place of having productive problem-solving conversations. I don't want to just hear how you feel. I do want to hear how you feel, because that's going to help you and me together.
Right.
Connect as humans, deepen our trust, and not be afraid of managing the conflict. Because relationships always have conflict. Good relationships have conflict. You get through it, and you're on the other side of it, and the relationship is deepened because of the conflict, not because you avoided the conflict.
Right. Oh, I love that. I love that saying it's deepened because of the conflict.
Yeah.
Avoiding the conflict, because I think too many people avoid that conflict thinking, I don't want to go there. And you're saying, no, you have to go there. You have to, to get to that problem solving mode, you have to air their feelings. You have to understand what's going on in the room and then deal with it effectively.
I mean, ultimately, everything in my book is about building trust, right? That if you don't have trust, you can't have the conversations. You can't name the elephant in the room for fear that there's going to be repercussions, right? You aren't going to voice a new idea. You're not going to admit that you're wrong. All of the innovation that we need, the kinds of courageous new actions that everyone is calling for, they all depend on people having the confidence that they can take a risk and they will not be punished for it. That requires trust. That's the whole concept of psychological safety. And to work in an organization in which you don't feel psychologically safe is to edit yourself and to restrain the actions of others. So ultimately, that's really what we're after.
Right, because then you have an organization of fear and what can I say and what can I, so it's building that foundation of trust in these 52 ways to help you get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. So any other final thoughts for our HR leaders in our audience?
So I think the most important thing to take away is that while there's always the advantages of having programs and banners and reminders about things that we should do, if you're building an inclusive culture, if you are trying to create an innovative, fast-moving, fast-responding organization, that oftentimes we need to slow it down just a beat and take a look in the mirror and see that all of us have the responsibility and the opportunity to make a difference. That it's not going to be a program, it's not going to be a boss or a leader, it's going to be you. And it doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take money, but it's how you show up. It's how you connect. And it's what you do as an individual. And that will drive organizational change that drives system change.
One by one by one.
Absolutely. One by many more.
By many more. I love it. I love it. Especially in the big organizations, right?
Absolutely. It's so easy to feel like you don't have power to make a difference. And I don't buy it. I've worked with too many organizations, and I see the individuals make up the organization, and each individual makes a difference. And so you need to step away from that disempowered sense of I'm overwhelmed by all there is to do. What I do doesn't matter. Wrong. What you do matters greatly and will have a huge effect for you and for everybody around you.
What a wonderful way. And thank you. One of the 52. Thank you for being here today. It was a really great conversation about what organizations can do to build that trust in their culture.
Thank you so much for having me, Denise, and good luck with everything that you're doing. It's so important to have a podcast like yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to just speak out to all our podcast listeners. If you're not a subscriber yet to HR Studio Podcast, you can become one by going to hrstudiopodcast.com, and you'll be notified of episodes. And also there you'll find all of our speakers' social handles and more information about Dr. Katzman's book. So we look forward to that. Once again, thank you. And I'm going to get you out of here on time. And we look forward to seeing your book.
Thank you so much. Great talking to you, Denise.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the HR Studio Podcast. To download complimentary resources from this week's episode and to catch up on past episodes, please visit hrstudiopodcast.com. Subscribe to the HR Studio podcast list and social channels while there to receive alerts and recaps on all our episodes. HR Studio Podcast is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates. For over 35 years, AJO has built its reputation on experienced listening, exceptional quality, and caring partnerships, delivering in 30 states and 20 countries. To learn more and subscribe to AJO's Top 100 HR blog, visit us at ajoconnor.com.